remember that. So after that, and I had been invited to be a member of the bands, all the bands that I had worked with, including the Rolling Stones. Then I met John Lennon. I had actually worked with the Beatles. I helped them write the White Album. The reason why the album was recalled was to take my name off it. I had writing credits on most of the songs. You can kind of tell that I wrote or had something to do with Rocky Raccoon. I mean, it was such a divergence for them to do something. It was really different for them, and that's why I wanted it to be a White Album, because you know, virginal, a rebirth kind of thing. Anyway, I wrote the movie Yellow Submarine and decided it should be done as a cartoon. There were 5 people who were hired to write it before me who couldn't do it, and they showed me when I went to see if I should write it. They had been told I was dead after the White Album, so I looked enough different, because every couple of years when you're growing like that, you know, you look different. So I wrote Yellow Submarine. I looked at what they had so far, and I said, well, who's going to do the drawings, and how are you going to do the Beatles drawings, and, you know, perhaps to use the Peter Max drawings of the Beatles and do it like that. And they said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, you're going to do this as a cartoon, right? And they said, no. And I said, well, then I can't write it either. If it's not going to be a cartoon, there's no way to write this as a script. So they said, okay. You know, we did it as a cartoon. And then years later after that, the Beatles had basically broken up. And their manager had gotten sick. He got cancer, I think. Brian Epstein. He was also, I think, he did the mixing, which they thought really helped. He was like an integral part of the Beatles. And people will say he's the 5th Beatle. I'm the 5th Beatle in the respect of that I wrote with them, I played guitar with them, and I sang with them. You can only hear my voice on very few of those recordings now. I was mixed out of them. But the albums I did with them were Magical Mystery Tour, Sgt. Pepper's, what was the other one? Let It Be, and Abbey Road. I also was responsible for the album covers. So I did a lot of work with them, and they would introduce me as the 5th Beatle. We never did we should have done what do you call it? A press conference, but we never seemed, we worked so hard that we never seemed to, nobody, for some reason, nobody put 2 and 2 together that I couldn't remember them, and, you know, that they really didn't, they weren't concerned about that, which is too bad. They really should have been more wary of it. And then one day, Keith Richards saw me and John walking down the street, and he came over and was talking to me, and John said, oh yeah, meet the newest member of the band. And Keith was really pissed. because I had not wanted to work with the Rolling Stones. I just didn't get along. I mean, they're fine. They were fine, but I like their music. In fact, when I joined the Beatles, I liked the Rolling Stones music better. And the reason why the Beatles wanted a fifth person was to be a tiebreaker. Two of the Beatles had wanted to keep the "I Want to Hold Your Hand" songs going, and when they asked me what I would do if I were a Beatle, I said I would move out of that niche. I think that's been done, and people have moved past it, and it's time for you to move on and do different music. And they said, well, what kind? And I said, well, you know what? You're so good that you really could do anything. In fact, I said, let's just do every album different kind of music. And they were real excited about that. So they were real happy, that I joined. There was never a question. They didn't even ask me if I wanted to join. But I did. I mean, they were great. I just loved, and they were great to work with, and they had a real good work ethic. And I'm really sick to death of hearing how we sat around and got high and wrote songs at Abbey Road, and that's not true. We didn't allow drugs in Abbey Road. The Abbey Road was the name of the studio, and the only reason it was called Abbey Road was because it was on Abbey Road. And they never did name the studio. They just say, you want to go over to Abbey Road. So when it came time to name the studio, it just, stuck. But we didn't have drugs there. And we never sat around and did drugs and wrote songs. Never. And I don't know what Ringo did in his spare time, because he didn't hang around with the Beatles. We would write and lay down tracks, and then when it was ready to record, then Ringo would come in and he would be the drummer. But John and I smoked sometimes, but not at Abbey Road, and George never did. I don't think George even drank, and Paul never did. He never did drugs, that I know. I mean, there was really no reason not to. Not to come clean about it. Nobody was. The only reason why drugs are in the song is because I felt that marijuana was far superior than alcohol, because it didn't do you any damage. It didn't do the same brain damage. It didn't do liver damage. It didn't work on your health. It didn't. And if anything, it did was it gave you a better appetite, so you'd eat better. If people were drunks, they would a lot of times just drink, and they would not get the nourishment that they needed. So all in all, I just felt it was stupid that marijuana was illegal and alcohol was legal. It was a personal vendetta against the people who were keeping marijuana illegal. And I knew it was because of the money, people getting kickbacks and this and that, and to the point where I found out later, money from the marijuana trade was part of the state budget in most of the states. So keeping it illegal they just needed to do that for money, not because it was bad for you. So that's why the marijuana is in quite a few of the songs, rather than liquor. So anyway, I met John because he he hired me as a muse. That was one of the things that they did, was hire me out as a muse. And I spent a lot of time with him. And then one day I got my roommate decided she didn't want to be roommates with me anymore. So I said to John, how about, he had the best apartment. John Lennon's apartment in the Dakota Hotel was in the movies Three Men and a Little Lady, Three Men and a Baby. I'm the one who did all the pictures. I directed those, and I did the artwork in the apartment, and that's John Lennon's apartment. You can look at it. It's the best apartment. It's really nice. Anyway, so I said, would you let me stay with you until I find another apartment? And he said, well, the only thing that's been keeping me in New York is you. And if you're going to live with me, how about you come to London and live with me there? And that's how I ended up going to London and meeting the boys. Now, the boys, when they met me, then they remembered me. But John, he probably had his memory erased or something. But he didn't really remember me. He remembered me once they said, that's the girl who helped us with the White Album and Yellow Submarine. So when you hear John say after one of the songs, you passed the audition, I was playing rhythm with John. I didn't realize it was an audition. I thought I was just jamming with him. And then at the end, there's another song. So my audition ended up, on albums. But there's the other song where George yells out, "I've got blisters on my fingers. I've got blisters on my fingers." Because I played for so long with them that, at one point they stopped to think of what other song they wanted to play, and I said, "Can we take a break? I've got blisters on my fingers." And then George yells, "I've got blisters on my fingers." But George's fingers were bleeding. So I had played with them long enough that what they had decided was, if somebody auditioned, that they wanted to play long enough that the person would say they weren't going to say that's it anymore, because they found out that if they said that and then the next time they got back together with that person would always stop playing too soon, and they wanted somebody with some stamina. So the fact that I outplayed them, they really liked that too. So that was, and I guess it really wasn't, people say, was it intimidating? They weren't intimidating at all. They were very, very nice. And then later when people would say to them, "Well, how did she do at the audition?" And they would say, "She played us under the table." But, so it was all good fun. They were great. I mean, musically, there's nobody like them. Paul and John together were a dream team. They really were. John and I, and then once I joined, John and I could come up with the lyrics and the basic melody, and then Paul would come in and just layer it all. Put the all kinds of finishing touches on the song, and he'd be able to say, that doesn't work or this doesn't work, and he could help with the words too. So I mean, it was a team that it was really unstoppable. And my focus was world peace. Since I didn't get paid for the White Album, they asked that they would take me on a trip, and where did I want to go? And I had heard about this Maharishi, who people were making a trip to go see to get answers about life, I guess. And so I wanted to go there, and that's how the Beatles ended up going to see the Maharishi. That was really early on. That was when I first joined them. It was a long trip just because it took a long time to get there. A lot of planes and trains and buses and stuff. So I talked to the Maharishi for quite a while, and I wanted to make sure that my idea of world peace was I was on the right track. And he said, I've never heard anyone speak like you do, and you are definitely on the right track, and whatever you can do to achieve world peace, you should do it. Whatever your instincts are, they're good instincts, and you should go with that. And I was armed with the Beatles behind me, what my vision was for the band. And we were making music that people were responding to in such a way that the world started to listen, and we started to get world peace. Things started to turn around, and of course when that happened, that's when I had to be taken away and my memory erased and their memory erased, and Brian Epstein was probably killed. So somebody from the Rolling Stones took over with the mixing, and he mixed me out of all the songs. And so if you're wondering how I could be the fifth Beatle and you can't hear me, you can hear me in some of the songs. Some of the songs I didn't want to be lead singer. What we decided was if it's a song, a woman's song, then I would be the lead singer. But that kind of opened up another world for them, that they could think that way, that now they had a woman who could sing. So some of the songs that kind of sound a little empty, especially John Lennon's songs that he did by himself, I did those with him. It sounds very empty because my guitar was taken out and my voice was taken out. So that's why those Lennon songs sound so thin. They're still good songs. I should say, since it's Father's Day, that Working Class Hero was John Lennon's song for his father. And Working Class Hero is a really good song. Really good song. I helped him with that. But it is extraordinary. I only helped him because he wrote it. But so I have been changing the world toward world peace for many, many, many years. Then I always write, pretty much all the songs that you hear about peace are mine. I would say they're all mine. I haven't come across one yet that I don't remember writing now. So that always helps, always a little shot in the arm to keep people focused that there's a possibility, that world peace is a possibility. I remember John Lennon and I talked to Dick Cavett after I said, maybe we should go on TV show or something. John said, well, I can get us on Dick Cavett anytime. He said, anytime. So Dick Cavett had like a special show without an audience because John was afraid of, all four of those guys were scared of the fans. The fans were the word fan comes from the word fanatic, and their fans were fanatics and could get scary. I didn't experience it so much. Oh, the only time I played with them in public, well, there's the time we did a benefit, and John says, the people in the back clap your hands, the people in the front rattle your jewelry, which I thought they're not gonna like that, but they laughed. They thought it was funny. And another time that I played with them publicly was on the roof. And you could see, when you looked at that rooftop concert, you could see my shadow. So you could see there was another person there. And I said something when I was watching it. So then they took that shadow out. So you couldn't even tell I was even there. But, that's when I could see why those guys were so scared of their fans. That was an amazing day. I mean, we started to play, and shop owners came out. I mean, everybody came out on the street. People stopped their cars and stood in the streets. I mean, the streets were just filled with people, and nobody moved. But getting out we had to go across rooftops, and we couldn't get down. We couldn't get back down. People wouldn't disperse. I kept telling them to listen to the cops and disperse. But, yeah, finally, we just waited until everybody left. But those are the only times in public. Rita also said that they went around and killed everybody who was at that rooftop concert on the street that day. I don't know if that's possible, but that's what she told me, because the stories were spreading, because they would say, here she is, and every time I would sing harmony over them, people would scream in the street, and then John and Paul would back up and they would scream, because they were so happy that the people were very accepting of this other voice, The guitar, you'll hear, it sounds like two rhythm guitars, and that's really the only way you can tell that there's another person. A lot of times my voice will be changed, kind of morphed into Paul's voice on some of the records. And sometimes on Hey Jude, which I wrote for Julian, and the reason why that song goes on forever is because we started to play it for him, and it was the first time I'd ever seen that boy smile. So I wanted that song to go on forever. And that's why it's 6 minutes long. But by the second 3 minutes, the last 3 minutes, you can definitely hear me in that. You can hear me in a few of the songs, Eleanor Rigby, a few of the songs. You can hear me pretty well, but most of them, I'm gone. So, and the reason why they broke the Beatles up was because of world peace. They don't want world peace. So once again,